Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 11 deadline decisions. This is a weekly series where I take you through your final questions and dilemmas ahead of the upcoming deadline. If you are enjoying the content here on this channel, please do remember to like, comment and subscribe. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, one of the major decisions for a lot of us this week is around benching decisions. Maybe even you're not even making a transfer. I guarantee that for the large majority, you are looking at a couple of players in your team and trying to work out who to bench. And I think specifically for the defense, a lot of our defenders this week either have bad fixtures, but they're good assets, or maybe slightly better fixtures, but they're not quite good as assets. So we're making that decision and trying to weigh up whether it's worth starting the player with the better fixture or maybe the slightly better asset. And there were tons of questions around which defenders to start and bench this week. So rather than just answering every single benching dilemma, I tried to put most of the key defenders on this list here. And even if I haven't included everyone, hopefully you can get a bit of an idea about players that I would start and bench ahead of others. And it is worth noting, I obviously can't predict the future. But generally speaking, most of the time, I tend to get my benching decisions okay. And I think with the defenders, it is very difficult to predict clean sheets. It's also difficult to predict when attacking returns will come. You never know when the centre-back that's got absolutely no goal threat will go ahead and score a bullet header. So I think it is pretty tricky to predict. But there are largely three things that we need to consider when we're looking at which defenders to start and which defenders to bench. I think the first thing is attacking threat, because even if they don't get a clean sheet, Kieran Trippier is a fantastic example. You get an attacking return, and you can also pick up bonus points as well. You can come away with an 8 or 9 pointer with absolutely no clean sheet. So attacking threat has to be considered, and especially this season, there are significantly less clean sheets than we've seen in previous seasons, because of the additional amount of minutes, I think, is a major factor. And also, I think a lot of the teams and players have played so much football in recent years that I think there is also an element there too. But whatever the reason for it, there aren't as many clean sheets this year, so I think attacking threat is even more important than it has been in the past. Another thing to consider is the strength of the defence that player plays for. For example, let's take Gabriel. Maybe not got the best fixture this week, but I certainly wouldn't say he's the worst option, because Arsenal are, so far this season, the best defence in the league according to expected goals conceded. So that's one thing to consider. And then the final thing to consider is obviously the strength of the attack that they are playing against. So not only how good are they defensively, but basically the fixture. And I think you have to decide yourself which of those three you give most weighting to. And I think it is, for each individual player, slightly different. For example, I would give more weighting to Trippier's attacking threat than I would someone like Tsimikas, because while Tsimikas does carry some, he doesn't carry anywhere near as much as Trippier. And even for, we'll go back to Trippier, I would give Newcastle's defensive strength a lot of weighting on top of, again, someone like a Liverpool, because Newcastle are so good defensively. So there are some things that you need to consider. With all of that put together, here is the rough kind of list from start at the top to bench at the bottom. And obviously, Udogie looks like he'll be out probably anyway at the time we're recording this on Thursday evening for Game Week 11. But let's wait for an update on that. Regardless, I don't think it's a great fixture anyway, and I think there are definitely better options. And Botman, of course, is looking like he's going to be injured for at least the foreseeable future. So I wouldn't be playing Udogie and Botman. I've tried to highlight the players that I think are definitely players that people are struggling to decide whether to bench or start this week in orange. So Trippier, Gakey, Burn, Gabriel and Taylor seem to be the players that most people were concerned with. Tsimikas and Cash, I would absolutely be starting, because they have a bit of everything. They have attacking threat, they're playing for decent defences, and the fixtures are pretty decent this week as well. So Tsimikas and Cash I wouldn't be benching. Udogie and Botman I definitely would. All of the players in the middle, you could justify starting all of them or benching any of them. For me, at the moment, I am likely to start Trippier. Not definitely, but likely, because of the reasons that I just gave. Because I've been thinking about this. Arsenal is a terrible fixture. I don't really expect a clean sheet for Trippier. But what do you want from a defender? You want attacking threat, you want bonus points potential, and you want a player that is playing in a good defence. And Newcastle at home are exceptional defensively. Trippier's data over the last 5 or 6 game weeks is outrageously good, and he's a bonus points monster. Gets a clean sheet, an assist, a goal, he will finish on 2 or 3 bonus. So Trippier's attacking threat alone and the clean sheet potential means that regardless of the fixture, he's always got a chance to get you some good points. So for that reason, I've actually got him above a lot of the other defenders with slightly better fixtures. I would say that Gahey is up there as well, and I would say he's arguably above Fabian Schär and Dan Burn. And the reason for that is, yes, Schär and Burn playing the same defence as Kieran Trippier, but they don't quite carry that same attacking threat. And in the case of Burn, there is very limited threat. So I think you've just got to play Gahey, play the fixtures. I mean, in recent weeks, he's actually had really good goal threat. Bonus points are decent too. Palace are a very strong defence, and Burnley aren't the strongest attacking outfit. So for that reason, I've got him above the two Newcastle defenders, and also Lascelles in there too. You can see that as a result, I do place the Newcastle defenders above the Arsenal ones. And this was a tricky one for me because so far this season, Arsenal are the best defence in the league for expected goals conceded. So by all accounts, you would say that in every week, they've got a good chance for a clean sheet. But it is Newcastle away. And we know how strong, not only defensively Newcastle are at home, but from an attacking perspective as well. They just put tons of goals past teams. So I think that if I were to predict one of these two teams to keep a clean sheet in this game, for me, it's probably Newcastle and not Arsenal. That being said, I could quite easily see this being either 0-0 or something like 3-3. I can't really call this game, and I find that's often the case when we are seeing big teams play against each other. But for me, I just think due to the fact that it's at Newcastle at home, I would just about lean the Newcastle defenders ahead of the Arsenal defenders. And you can see that I've got Taylor below all of them. And again, this was a tricky one for me because it's a very good fixture. Palace at home, with the way that Palace are currently attacking, in something like the last 5 or 6 games, Palace have scored no more than 1 goal. So I don't think this will be a high scoring game at all. But I just think you've surely got to back the Arsenal and Newcastle defences, I think, ahead of Taylor and Burnley. That's not me saying that I don't think it's possible for Burnley to keep a clean sheet. And again, the fixture is absolutely there. But I'm going to back Palace to score against what is not a very good Burnley defence. And I'm backing it to be relatively low scoring in the Newcastle-Arsenal game. And I would rather just back slightly better defences. So for that reason, I do have Taylor below the Arsenal and the Newcastle defence. But I could, again, if you told me you were starting Taylor because the fixture's there, I would say that's absolutely fine. I would just prefer to back the slightly stronger defences. So hopefully that makes sense with respect to benching decisions this week. I think, again, if you told me that Taylor or Gabriel scored Trippier this week, wouldn't be surprised. If you told me that Gahey blanked, I wouldn't be surprised. I think it's very, very tricky, that middle section. Definitely wouldn't be benching Tsimikas and Cash, though. And I just think that Newcastle could potentially get one up on Arsenal and keep a clean sheet. So at the time of me recording this, I don't yet know how serious Pedro Neto's injury is. But regardless of if it is serious or it isn't, some people are asking about replacements for him because it's probably likely to keep him out at least for a little spell. And even at the time, if you're watching this, if you now know that he's not out at all, I still think it's worth having a discussion around the cheap midfielders at that price point, because a lot of us are looking to use funds elsewhere. Maybe you're trying to get 3 or 4 premiums in your team. And as a result, you need a cheap 7th or 8th attacker. So here are some of my favourite cheap midfielders in and around that Pedro Neto price point. And in first, I do have Adingra. He's just got everything I would want from a player at that price. He's got that explosive ability because Brighton create so many chances. His data's not necessarily fantastic, but playing in a team like that, on any given day, you could get 2, 3, 4 big chances in that team. So I like that he's playing for such an attacking outfit. On top of that, due to the injury to March, I think Adingra is pretty much nailed. And by nailed, I don't mean we'll start every game, but I mean first choice and we'll start the majority of games, because they have Buonanotte that can play out on the right, but he's just not played enough minutes recently to steal minutes in the future away from Adingra. They could play Ansu Fati on the right, but largely thus far Ansu Fati has been preferred through the middle. So I think Adingra's pretty much got to be first choice, and as a result, I expect him to start most of the upcoming games. The fixtures are definitely there for Brighton. There's very little to dislike about him. So I really like Adingra as an option, as long as you accept that there could be 1 or 2 games in the next, 6 to 8 game weeks that he could potentially be benched, but he might do damage off the bench. So I do really like him as an option. He would be my favourite at that price point. I've got Gordon in second. This is a tricky one because lots of people looking at moving Gordon on. Obviously got a very difficult fixture this week, and the fixtures for Newcastle aren't great, and I will accept that. But if you removed fixtures, which is a silly thing to say because fixtures exist, Gordon is comfortably the best player on this list for me. And what I said previously about Newcastle just being a great side in the Trippier section, Newcastle will still score goals. I still expect Newcastle to create chances in every single game. And Gordon is their best attacker, in my opinion. Obviously, it will be Callum Wilson, Almiron and Gordon in pretty much every week at the moment because they just don't have any depth in and around that. But I think that is a cracking front line. Their midfield is still really strong too. And yes, they've lost Botman, but defensively they're strong. And Eddie Howe is a system-based manager. You could replace most of the players in that starting 11 apart from maybe Trippier, and I would still expect Newcastle to perform very, very well. But even with Livramento coming in, you could arguably still do that. So I still think Newcastle will do really well over this spell. And from sort of game week 16, 17 onwards, the fixtures are really nice for Newcastle. In fact, if you look from this game week right now in game week 11 to game week 19, Newcastle actually topped the fixture ticker. So I think if you're looking over a slightly longer spell, the fixtures are there for Gordon. And so I wouldn't be selling him. I think he's got great data, one of the best players at that price point, and he's a really nice long-term hold. And if Newcastle score goals, which you would expect, I think Gordon will be involved in them. So I really like him as an option. And despite the fixtures, I've still got him in second. And if we're talking about bad fixtures, they don't get much worse than Palmer's over the next few. But in a similar way, from 15 or 16 onwards, Chelsea's fixtures look really good. And Palmer just looks brilliant at the moment. He's on penalties. He's creating chances at a ridiculous rate in that sort of number 10 role. He can also play as kind of the false nine or through the centre as a centre forward. I think once Nkunku comes back, the link up between those two will be fantastic as well. My only slight concern over Palmer is the fixtures really are rough over the next few. And on top of that, once Nkunku is back, he might no longer have penalties. But for the time being, yes, the fixtures aren't there, but he's such a bargain at that price that I still think he is one of the best options. In fourth, I have Hwang. And out of all the players we've spoken about thus far, other than maybe a Dingra, Hwang has the best fixtures. He's got Sheffield United this week, and his data is very, very strong. So you might think, why is Hwang down in fourth? I just don't know what they're going to look like without Neto. And again, Neto might not be out for long at all, if at all. But if he is out for longer than maybe 1 or 2 game weeks, how are Wolves going to set up in the absence of Pedro Neto? Are they going to create the number of chances that they have? In fact, a few of Hwang's goals have been assisted by Neto. But on top of that, even if he hasn't directly assisted, the runs that he makes, the things that he can create by being such a talented player, is creating chances for Hwang. So I just don't know how he'll function in the absence of Neto. And I would just want to wait a little bit to see how serious is the Neto injury, but also how does that affect Hwang. So that's the only reason he's in fourth. Fixtures data, you would probably expect to see him slightly higher. I've got a wild card in there in fifth, and that's Jordan Ayew. Really okay sort of average data, but the fixtures are definitely there for Palace. And he's actually looking like one of the main goal threats at the moment alongside Edouard. No, I'm not expecting Palace to score loads of goals, but they've got a decent fixture this week. And over the next 3 or 4, the fixtures are really strong too. So if you're looking for a shorter term option that absolutely no one else will have, I don't mind Jordan Ayew. Looks fairly nailed at the moment as well. And then in sixth, I've got Douglas Luiz. I still don't like Douglas Luiz as a pick. His data outside of penalties is shocking. In fact, I know he just got an assist and bonus points, but it was something like a 0.1 XGI in that game. He will not keep getting away with this. He's getting very, very fortunate assists. He scored a couple of long shots and he's got penalties. Outside of that, he's not really carrying much attacking threat. And I know he takes some corners as well, but he's not even created that many chances from corners. So for me, yes, he's fine, but he's not an option just because I would want the data to be slightly better. But the fixtures over the next 2 are there. He is still on penalties, and he does have a great long shot. So you never know, could still pick up a few points. So that's kind of how I would rate them. I have no real issue with any of the players on this list, especially Adingra, Gordon, Palmer, and Hwang. I can't really complain about any of them, and I like Ayew as a differential option. Right, let's discuss the elephant in the room, Erling Haaland. Interestingly, tons of different questions around him. So I thought I would just discuss Erling Haaland. And there were 3 kind of distinct questions that seemed to be coming in. Some around, is it worth taking a hit to bring Haaland back in? And I will discuss that because, of course, I could do that if I wanted to. The next question is, let's say you don't own Haaland and you don't necessarily want to own him from 12 onwards, which we'll discuss in a second, but you obviously really want him for this week. Is it viable, especially considering that a lot of our other players don't have great fixtures, is it viable to free hit him or free hit just this week, just to get Haaland back in, improve some of the fixtures in your team, and then obviously from 12 onwards, you would then have no Haaland for that slightly more difficult run. And then there was also questions around, should we triple captain Haaland? So around taking a hit to bring Haaland back in, I don't like this personally. You've gone without Haaland for a reason. You shouldn't be surprised that Haaland got a 16-pointer against United. United are a poor defence at the moment. Haaland is absolutely excellent, and he has it in his locker on any given day, especially when he gets a penalty, to get that kind of haul. So that shouldn't have massively shocked you. I don't think that should change your game plan. So unless your game plan was always to take a hit in Game Week 11 to bring him back, I don't really understand what has changed. On top of that, I don't think you want him from 12 to 15. Lots of people are asking, is it viable to sell him? So if you've already not got him, you're going to save a transfer on top of people that might want to transfer him out in 12. I mean, Chelsea away, Liverpool at home, Tottenham at home, and Villa away. Those are not good fixtures. Chelsea have been really good defensively. Liverpool and Tottenham have been decent. And in these big games, you can see limited goals sometimes, especially with Manchester City. And then in 15, they're playing Villa away. Villa have been so good at home. I hate those 4 fixtures for Haaland. There is not a chance in hell I captain him in any of them. So if that's the case, why would you bring him back in for a -8 when you could argue that your team without him from 12 to 15 may be a little bit stronger? So this isn't me sitting here and saying I hate Haaland. I would love to own Haaland for this week. I don't like taking a monster hit to bring him back in to weaken your team, because then you'll be sat there in 12 and be thinking, I don't even necessarily want him for the next 4. So no to that first question for me, but if it allows you to sleep a little bit more comfortably at night, then maybe you want to go for it. The question around a free hit is interesting, because I wouldn't free hit just to bring Haaland back. I hate that. I think that's a terrible idea, because it's only one player. You don't want to waste an entire chip for one player. However, like I said, a lot of us have pretty poor teams, at least fixture-wise, this week. If you really are looking at your team and thinking it could be low scoring, I quite like the idea of a free hit, and I really do want to own Haaland for this week. I don't hate it, especially as this season it looks like there'll be significantly less blanks and doubles than in previous seasons. It could be a decent idea to free hit this week, I suppose. So I'm not necessarily saying I love it as an idea, but I wouldn't rule it out, and we will take a look in the next section at a potential free hit draft. So that one, I actually prefer, believe it or not, slightly to the idea of taking a -8. Should we triple captain Haaland? I'm less keen on this, because for me, I want to use a triple captain in a week where I think it is one of the best captaincy choices this season, and I'm not convinced that this is. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, there's only one fixture. And I think I would always prefer, if possible, to captain a player that has 2 fixtures in that game week, because obviously they get double the chance for an attacking return. And City haven't been at it this season. I know they looked obviously very good against Manchester United, but I think we made them look good. And they're about 7th or 8th this season for expected goals in the league. So this isn't a City team that's firing on all cylinders. And it's not really a Haaland that's firing on all cylinders either. And of course, he could turn it on any given day. And Bournemouth at home is definitely a fixture you want to captain him. I'm not talking you out of captaining Haaland, but is it the best fixture that you're going to get this season? I don't think so. So for me, no. Captaincy, absolutely. Triple captaincy, not for me. Especially as given in game week 20, we're expecting a double game week for Man City, and we're expecting it to be Sheffield United and Brentford. That's a week that I would want to triple captain Haaland. So not for me for the triple captaincy, not for me taking a -8 hit. Would I sell him in game week 12 for those 4 weeks? I think you could absolutely consider it. We'll discuss that next week probably in more detail, but those 4 fixtures are terrible. You're not going to captain him. I absolutely think you could get away with selling Haaland next week. The only one I don't mind is the idea of a free hit. So let's take a look at what a free hit draft would look like and consider whether it is much better than our current teams. So if I were to free hit, it would be along the lines of this. You have to target the fixtures in free hits. And I'm also thinking about what can you do that other people can't with your team. And I'm not necessarily saying you should go different just for the sake of it, but bring in players with high upside that non-free hit teams and your non-free hit team wouldn't be able to get to. So realistically, there are 2 fixtures this week that you want to target because they are 2 of the best attacks in the league. And that is the Liverpool fixture against Luton and the Man City fixture against Bournemouth. Now, I do also think these are great chances for clean sheets. So you could even justify going for like a double up on the City defence and going for 1 or 2 minimum Liverpool defenders as well. I think you could conceivably see lots of clean sheets there, but the upside is definitely with the more attacking players. So I've got 5 attackers from Liverpool and City coupled with Trent. And Trent, yes, obviously has the chance for a clean sheet, but he's there for the attacking threat. And unless you already own Trent, there will be very few people that will be moving to Trent this week, especially because Tsimikas is available for so much cheaper. But in a free hit week, you would definitely back Trent instead of Tsimikas. So Trent would be in there absolutely. I've got Salah, I've got Darwin. Darwin looks fantastic at the moment. If he starts, I think he's in for a really good performance once again. Salah, probably the second best player on paper for Game Week 11, so you would absolutely want Salah. Of course, Haaland would be in there, and he would be captain. That's one of the main benefits of it. And I've also got Alvarez and Foden in there. You could go for Doku or Grealish if you think you know who's going to start between them. Or you could, as I said, try and pick out a Man City defender that you think will start to cover the clean sheets. But I would definitely be having triple Liverpool, triple Man City. Another player that I would love to get in that maybe isn't highly owned at the moment is Mbeumo against West Ham at home. That feels like a really, really strong fixture. I've got Johnston in there to cover a decent chance for a clean sheet against Burnley away. Cash is in there because he carries attacking threat and he has a decent fixture. And then I've just chosen 2 Wolves players, believe it or not, because they've been performing fairly well recently. Yes, the Neto injury, if it is serious, might not be great for them, but they're playing against Sheffield United. So I feel like Kilman and Hwang Hee-chan, just to fill out that team, especially if you don't have the best budget, are 2 really nice cheap options. And then on the bench, I've got Taylor, Mark Gahey, and Doucouré, just because there are 3 players to just fill out the bench. So this is roughly what I'd be going with. Definitely triple Liverpool, definitely triple City. And in and around that, I think you can choose the players that you want to own. Is it viable? Is it that much better than our current teams? Probably not, right? I've already got a lot of these players in my team, and I think, am I that confident that Foden and Hwang outscore Son and Maddison? Not massively, no. So it's not for me the free hit this week, but if you really do have that Haaland FOMO, and you really don't like the look of your team, there are definitely worse weeks to play the chip, in my opinion. So I was actually asked this question, or these sorts of questions, by 3 people. And I didn't realize it was such a specific question that people had. But it was around Bowen and Darwin. Of course, at the same price now, or very similar price. And it would kind of change the structure of your team, which way you lean. Or maybe it wouldn't change the structure, but people are just wondering where they should be moving with their transfers. And it's Bowen versus Darwin. And this is a very interesting one, because both players have the fixtures. Both players have high upside in their own right, but are very, very different players, right? Bowen is absolutely nailed, playing in a very average attack, but being one of the main men in that attack. And then Darwin is absolutely not nailed, but playing one of the best attacks in the league and having the best data in the league. So I guess this comes down to a couple of things. It comes down to how much do you back West Ham to continue performing at a decent level? Because in the last couple, they've not quite looked at it. And it also comes down to how much do you back Darwin's minutes? Because if you back Darwin's minutes, this isn't a discussion. If you think Darwin will start the majority of the games coming up, I think Darwin is comfortably a better option than Jarrod Bowen. But if you start to think that in the next 5 he's benched in 2 as opposed to just 1, then I'm starting to think, well, when you take into account the amount of extra minutes that Bowen will get, Bowen could still outscore Darwin. But for me, I'm confident at the moment that Darwin will get good minutes. Not necessarily fantastic, but good. And as a result, I would lean towards Darwin. And I know that does make it, for some people, a decision, as you can see here, between a 3-5-2 and a 3-4-3. It's not ideal. I definitely prefer the 3-5-2. There are definitely more midfielders this year, and pretty much every year, that you would want to own. And the 3-5-2, especially with someone at Bowen's price point, leaves you so flexible to move to Matoma, Diaby, a Dinger at a cheaper price. You can even get up to someone like a Martinelli with a little bit in the bank. Whereas at Darwin's price point, there are very few strikers that I would be that interested in, other than maybe some slightly riskier, cheaper options like a Calvert-Lewin or an Edouard. So for me, if it's just a straight shootout, who do I think will score more points over the next 6 game weeks, Darwin or Bowen? I would back Darwin. So therefore, I would probably prioritise him. If it's structure-wise, I would probably back Bowen. And if it's like safety, you don't have a very high risk appetite, you don't want to take a risk with minutes, then Bowen may be the player that kind of ticks along, gets good minutes, and you just feel a bit safer owning every week. So it really depends what you're looking for. But if you were to ask me to predict, I think Darwin's the one to prioritise here. The final thing to discuss is around captaincy rankings, and this isn't just for people that don't own Haaland, but a lot of people will own him and still want to go slightly different, which in my opinion isn't the week to do it. But let's discuss captaincy. Won't do this for a particularly long time, but I think it is worth having the chat in most weeks. Haaland is the best captaincy option this week, and people always think there's some sort of reverse psychology going on. Bournemouth are one of the weakest defences in the league. City are incredibly good at home. Haaland's data is still some of the best in the league. He's actually scored quite a few goals in recent games, despite the fact that he hasn't looked fantastic. His data was really good against Manchester United. He's on penalties, 90-minute man. He is the obvious captaincy choice this week, and there is no chance in hell I would be looking at anyone else if I had him in my team. So, yes, captain Haaland if you have him. I still don't think it's the best week to triple captain, but I do really like captaincy on Haaland. So, for me, there's nowhere else to look if you own him. But let's say you don't own him, or you just aren't convinced by him and Man City at the moment, which is absolutely fair enough. I do think it is Mohamed Salah in second. He obviously did play 90 minutes midweek, which you could say slightly worrying, but I'm not too worried. I mean, there is really no one else that can play on that right. I don't think Klopp needs to risk it at the moment. Salah can comfortably play 90 minutes 2 or 3 times a week, and he actually had a rest recently in midweek. So I don't think Salah needs a rest at the moment. I would expect him to play 90 minutes once again against Luton, and Luton have actually conceded most of their chances from where Salah plays. So down their left flank, down Liverpool's right, that's where Luton concede most of their chances. So I am confident Salah will get chances in this game, but I think there is quite a large gap between Salah captain and Haaland captain. I just think if it was Luton at home, I'd be much more tempted by Salah if I owned both, but it's just got to be Erling Haaland for me. I do genuinely think there is a shout for Darwin if you are confident he starts, but unfortunately I'm not, so I just won't considering it. Because captaincy for me, you do not want your captain to not start. I mean, that is a huge, huge rookie error. Not only are you not getting great points from that player probably, it's obviously 2 times. You've almost benched 2 players if that happens. I never captain rotation risks. And I know Salah could conceivably be benched, and someone will probably clip this if he does. But Darwin is obviously much more of a minutes risk than Salah. So whilst I love Darwin, and whilst Darwin's data is the best in the league, I can't captain him at the moment when I'm not sure he starts. But maybe you're watching this and going, obviously he starts, right? They're not going to start Gakpo, just coming back from injury, obviously started midweek. They've only really got Jota, assuming that Diaz isn't available once again. Of course, Darwin starts. And if you're in that mindset, I genuinely think he's a captaincy shout. He's playing so well at the moment, finishing well, data's good. I can see him getting a decent score against Luton. So I think Darwin is a shout. Alvarez is a shout. If you don't own Haaland, Alvarez, I mean, if you're expecting City to score lots of goals against Bournemouth, it doesn't necessarily mean that Alvarez will be involved, as we saw against Manchester United. But if you're trying to back a fixture where you expect there to be goals, this is probably the one. So I really don't mind a punt on Alvarez. And I could see that paying off for you, absolutely. But for me, Darwin, Salah and Haaland are definitely above him. After that, I don't really think there are many other options. I don't actually love Watkins as an option because Forest are pretty good at home and Aston Villa haven't been great away. But Watkins continues to show good data, good attacking threat. Unlucky not to get anything in Game Week 10. I don't think he's a terrible captaincy shout this week. And same with Son. Whilst Chelsea are a great defence, Son is Son. Great data. Spurs are top of the league, attacking very well. You could see this being a game where there are 2 or 3 goals for each team quite comfortably. And as a result, Son could be going under the radar slightly. But I don't see as you look anywhere this week other than Liverpool and Man City. And when that's the case, you don't tend to look anywhere other than Haaland and Salah. So for me, Haaland comfortably the best captain. Salah after that. I just need to hope that Salah somewhat gets close to Haaland this week. So guys, there we have it. That is my Game Week 11 deadline decisions video. Hopefully this helps you to answer some of your final questions and dilemmas ahead of the deadline. But if you have any further ones that I've not answered in the video, do drop them below in the comments and I will do my best to answer as many as possible. Until next time, which will be the deadline stream tomorrow. Thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.